Okay, hello everybody, welcome back to Foundations of Photography, Lesson 3. So today we're going to cover the exposure triangle, which last week I introduced you to all the manual controls that you can find on digital cameras of today. Now, if you have a camera that is missing one or more of these controls, then those controls can be found in software, and that includes camera cell phones. So, anyway, keep that in mind. Now, for example, on the iPhone, all those control settings, shutter speed, aperture, ISO, in the normal iPhone app, you're not going to see those controls typically. As they've updated their software, they are exposing more of those controls to the user, but usually you have to get a separate camera app to have direct control over those settings. Anyway, moving on. So today, this morning, I went outside. I took my Fuji X-H1 and I have an M42 screw mount Yashica 50mm lens, f1.7 aperture, and on the X-H1, since it's a crop sensor, the lens focal length performs like a 75mm. So the examples that I'm about to show you generally don't show extremes, but you can tell the difference as we go through them. So first up, we have our camera set to f1.7. The shutter speed is 1/8,000th of a second, and the camera's ISO is set to 200. Now, that is essentially the least sensitive ISO setting, but it gets you the most detail, typically. 1/8,000th of a second is because we're shooting in full sun. Now, at this point, I am shooting ISO and shutter speed on automatic. So our next photo, I have changed the aperture only, in this case to f5.6. So now my shutter speed has dropped automatically to 1,250th of a second, with ISO still at 200. But if you notice, there's not a huge difference in this picture other than better depth of field, so more of the picture is in focus. There's a little bit of blur in the background on this one, but not a great deal. Okay, so now we're going to move up to f11. So here's f11 at 1/30th of a second and ISO 200. Now this picture is well overexposed because the shutter speed is too slow. Okay, so going forward, I'm going to leave the aperture at f11, and for the next 3 pictures, I am adjusting the ISO. So our first picture here, I manually set the ISO to 200. Again, we're at f11 and we're at 210th of a second. It's a reasonably well exposed picture. Everything's in focus. We've got good detail. Okay, so for the next image, again, we are changing. Oh, that didn't actually change. Oh, our shutter speed changed a little bit. Okay. So in this particular case, I'm shooting still at ISO 200. We have 250th of a second at f11. Again, it's a good picture and not much, really any different from the previous picture. Okay. Now we're changing to ISO 320 at 480th of a second. Again, a nice picture. You know, and the pictures really don't change much as we progress. So here, let's see, moving on to the next picture. So now we're at ISO 800 at 950th of a second, still at f11. So some of the things you will start to notice now is you're getting more detail in the background. So our next picture is ISO 1250 at 250th of a second, still f11. You know, there's not a huge difference in this exposure, or yeah, the general overall exposure, even though I'm changing settings somewhat significantly. Okay, so now we're at 1/4000th of a second at ISO 2500. And again, the picture is essentially the same, because while we have modified one portion of the triangle of exposure, the camera has adjusted the automatic portions to compensate for those changes. Now, you know, these pictures are typically slightly all overexposed, but that can be adjusted in a couple of different ways. You can manually set all of your dials. So, for example, in this last image, you know, we're at 1/4000th of a second. If I were to drop and only drop the ISO to, let's say, ISO 1250, that would equal one stop of less light being collected and recorded by the sensor. So while this doesn't necessarily demonstrate what changing each of those settings does, what it does do is it shows how your camera will compensate for changes to one side of your exposure triangle, so your exposure more or less stays the same. The one significant difference here was shooting at a 30th of a second resulted in an overexposed because the camera couldn't compensate enough. So I hope this helps you understand what's going on with your camera and how to compensate for changes and getting things a good exposure. Getting a good exposure, I should say. So, anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm hoping you're not more confused by this video. If you are, please send me a comment or send me an email. Let me know, and we'll try and create a different set of conditions and perhaps maybe make it a little clearer. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed and liked this lesson. If you do, please press the like and subscribe buttons. Thanks, and have a great week.